Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something fascinating and honestly a little bit terrifying about chess. We're going to look at how completely natural, textbook opening moves can suddenly trigger these devastating traps, literally ending the game before it even really gets going. Whether you're a complete beginner or a seasoned club player, there are these hidden landmines in the opening phase just waiting to detonate.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the illusion of safety. Then, Legal's mate and deadly greed. Next up is the elephant trap, followed by the Slav defense blunder. After that, we'll check out the Monticelli trap, and finally, wrap up with how to avoid these traps altogether. All right, let's just jump right in. Section 1. The illusion of safety. You see, to really grasp how players fall into these traps, we first have to understand the psychology behind them. It's rarely about just playing foolishly, right? It's more about our brains taking shortcuts. Every great chess trap actually follows this distinct three-act micro-narrative. First, you've got the setup. These are moves that look perfectly standard, totally aligned with opening theory. Second is the illusion of safety. This is a natural-looking move where the player completely misses the danger because they think they're totally secure. And then, well, finally comes the punishment, a shocking tactical blow that just shatters that false security. It's crazy how much these traps rely on human psychology and that autopilot mode we all slip into from time to time.
Moving on to Section 2, Legal's mate, deadly greed. For this absolute classic, we're traveling all the way back to 1750 in Paris to a game played by Sire de Légal. This is arguably the most famous trap in chess history, and amazingly, it still catches players off guard today, over 270 years later. So out of the Philidor defense, Black thinks they're just safely developing their pieces. Moving the bishop to g4 seems incredibly logical, right? It pins the white knight on f3 to the white queen on d1. Black is sitting there thinking, okay, that knight cannot move. Then Black plays g6 to prepare a fanchetto. It looks completely standard, but man, it sets the perfect bait. Now, you might be wondering, what happens if White just ignores that pin? The entire trap actually hinges on White breaking the supposed rules of chess and moving a pinned piece anyway. Just try to imagine the sheer psychological shock for the opponent here. Boom, White just plays knight takes e5. They completely ignore the pin, leaving their own queen hanging in the breeze. Black, basically blinded by greed at this point, snaps up the free queen with bishop takes d1. But oh boy, here comes the punishment. Bishop takes f7 check, forcing the king to e7, and then knight to d5, checkmate. Literally just three minor pieces delivering the stunning, devastating mate right in the center of the board. This sequence brilliantly illustrates how our instinctual greed, wanting to instantly capture the strongest piece, can completely override our tactical alarm bells. If Black had just paused for a second and questioned why White was sacrificing the queen, they could have played bishop to e6 instead. Sure, they'd lose a pawn and have a worse position, but they would survive. Taking that queen was absolutely the fatal blunder. So how can you actually use this in your games? Keep this specific checklist in the back of your mind. You need your bishop aiming at that weak f7 square, your knights developed to f3 and c3, the opponent's bishop pinning your f3 knight, and that f7 pawn defended solely by the enemy king. If you ever see these specific conditions align on the board, definitely take a moment to calculate if this stunning queen sacrifice works for you. All right, Section 3, the elephant trap. Let's move on to our next trap and see how it builds on that exact same idea of false pins. This one is nestled right inside the Queen's Gambit Declined, and it famously showed up in a match between Maya and Harwitz in Berlin way back in 1848. In this sequence, White falls for the ultimate illusion of safety. They see Black's knight on f6 and think it's pinned to the Black queen by the bishop on g5. So White greedily captures the pawn on d5 with their knight, mistakenly believing that f6 knight is absolutely pinned. White is probably sitting there thinking they just want a free central pawn. But what happens when that so-called pinned knight takes back? I really want you to pause for a second and just imagine the absolute shock on White's face when Black reaches out and confidently grabs that allegedly paralyzed knight on f6. Black just plays knight takes d5. White, probably grinning, gleefully captures the Black queen with bishop takes d8. But then comes the sting. Bishop to b4 check. White's only legal move to block that check is to immediately give their own queen right back with queen to d2. After the dust settles with bishop takes d2 check and king takes d2, Black calmly recaptures the bishop on d8. And the result of all that chaos? Black is up a full piece and has a completely winning game. So,
The really crucial takeaway from both Légal's mate and the elephant trap is this golden rule. A pin is never truly absolute unless it's against the king. Period. Just because a piece is pinned to a queen, it doesn't mean it can't move, especially if moving it results in some devastating counterattack or a checkmate. You should always question the true strength of a pin. Okay, moving right along to section 4, the Slav defense blunder. Now, what's absolutely mind-blowing about this more modern trap is that it mathematically catches a staggering 1/3 of players who reach this position. We're talking about catching even master-level players rated above 2200 online. The sequence basically goes like this. Black's knight jumps to e4, white trades it off, and then white plays the move e3. It looks so incredibly normal, right? White is just solidifying their pawn chain, literally playing by the book, but totally to their own detriment. Because by playing this automatic pawn push to e3, white accidentally traps their own bishop on g5 and leaves their king dangerously exposed. So, how does black punish this premature e3 pawn push? Put yourself in black's shoes for a second. Can you spot the simple, yet totally winning tactical idea that ends the game instantly, all because white blocked their own bishop's retreat? It's a swift queen fork. Black plays queen to a5 check. The white king is under attack, and that trapped bishop on g5 is simultaneously targeted. Because white played e3 earlier, the bishop has literally no way to retreat and block the check. White just loses the bishop outright. This seemingly simple oversight leads to instant resignations in hundreds and hundreds of high-level games. It's wild. Next is section 5, the Monticelli trap. This final deep dive is really for all you tacticians out there. This one famously appeared in a true clash of titans between Jose Raul Capablanca and Max Ewa in the Bogo Indian defense. After a pretty standard fianchetto setup from black, the tension starts building in the center. Black decides to trade their knight on c3. It seems like a perfectly simple, simplifying exchange. However, by taking that knight, black walks right into a brilliantly venomous response from white that just completely flips the entire board. Instead of recapturing immediately, white unleashes the move knight to g5. This single, suspenseful move exploits the contested diagonals just beautifully. It simultaneously threatens a brutal checkmate on h7, attacks the fianchettoed bishop on b7, and targets the rook trapped behind it on a8. It's an absolute nightmare. Black is suddenly forced to navigate these immense tactical complications just to survive the opening. Which brings us to our final section, avoiding the traps. We've seen the sheer destruction that a single innocent-looking move can cause. So let's consolidate everything we've learned and look at how you can actually protect yourself from these opening disasters. Here are your golden rules. First, never, ever capture a quote-unquote free piece, especially a queen, without strictly calculating the opponent's follow-up. Second, always assess if a pin is truly absolute or if it's just a clever illusion. Third, you've got to stop playing automatic pawn moves like an early e3 or g3 without looking at the whole board. And finally, always keep your eyes peeled for those early discovered attacks and queen forks. Whether it's the specific traps we've explored today or others you might run into like the Siberian trap or the Lasker trap, applying these fundamental rules will absolutely keep your king safe. So which natural opening move are you playing today that might actually be hiding a fatal blunder? I'll leave you with that thought. The next time you sit down at the board and go to make your standard automatic opening moves, ask yourself, is this really safe or am I walking straight into a trap? Scrutinize your openings, calculate deeply, and most importantly, keep learning. Thanks so much for joining me in this explainer, and I will catch you next time.